Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Unleashing DePIN podcast. My name is Tyler. I am your host, and I am quite excited for the next guest that we get to have on the pod. It sounds like this is his first podcast, so let's give him a nice, warm introduction. We have Luca from the base team. Luca, how are you doing? Welcome to the podcast, my friend. I'm excited to have you.
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Tyler. Thank you for inviting me for my first podcast. Appreciate it.
This is going to be great. Maybe for just level setting the conversation, can you share with folks who you are? You're intimately involved with DePIN at base, so you've got a very unique perspective, I think. But let's jump into introductions, and then we can kick off the conversation from there.
Yeah, of course. So I'm currently leading both AI and DePIN at base. Originally got into crypto more generally early 2020, 2021. Was really fortunate to be surrounded by some close peers and friends who were working in crypto full time. I didn't really know that was like a profession when I was getting into it. I just thought it was like something you could speculate on. I got really interested in the ethos of really the Ethereum community, decentralization and ownership, and made me like want to take the jump right away. I was studying computer and cognitive science at the time at Penn, so that's like where like the later interest in AI comes from as well. But immediately started, when I jumped in, worked in venture for a bit at GSR, the market maker, got to basically see what everyone was building in the ecosystem during that last bull market, then transitioned to an advisory firm called Genesis Block that was really on the leading edge of the legal side of crypto, real world assets, bringing that on chain, really like complex financial instruments and like what does that mean to decentralize these things, integrate them with regulatory assets, etc. I think that all combined to my interest in DePIN being on the forefront of all these different technologies. Actually, when I joined Base, I believe I was like the first non-technical hire for the Base team directly. The team was like kind of like all combined of basically the most on-chain native people at the company that Jesse could pull from. And initially I got brought in just to scale our ecosystem team. Like we're just getting our feet under us. Had launched, I joined the team at the beginning of 2024. My first day was like the beginning of the year. So I was really thinking through, hey, like how can we be super hands-on with a larger and larger amount of builders in our ecosystem, develop programs that are going to support them, that are scalable. But the first proposal I ever wrote internally was why we should be focusing on DePIN. So it's nice to see from that point like where the base ecosystem has come when it comes to DePIN, and excited to talk more about it.
Yeah, I love that. It's super fascinating. So it's safe to say that you were into DePIN then before you were at base. You were the one driving the, hey, let's focus on this as a category within the ecosystem.
Yeah, I would say, I think really when I joined, like we are still like, base is still relatively young, but this is like before Farcaster Frames, just like a big moment for us after that initial launch where we got that next burst of energy and burst of users and developers. And it was really like being thoughtful on, okay, I think base is really well positioned to accomplish our mission of bringing the world on chain, and what category is really going to help bring us there, and just our focus on consumer products and making the best consumer products and just like end user experience possible, I think really was a compelling pitch for DePINs to potentially come to base. And I think we see that in a lot of the DePINs that have come, that either migrated or are going to launch on base, and how they think about their product.
Yeah, sure. That's super interesting. And so what was the core thesis driving DePIN as a category for base? Obviously, there's the intersection between consumer applications, but how did you position this to the team to convince them that this is a direction they should go?
Yeah, I think it was like fairly logical, right? If we're saying like, hey, like we want to build a blockchain that's going to bring 1 billion people on chain, like what apps are going to bring those people on chain? I think we already have a very strong consumer focus, obviously like DeFi. And then DePIN was really what's going to bring like these next use cases that are targeting these massive TAMs that touch the real world in ways where users will not know they're on chain, which is I think really like the products that we are trying to optimize for and build for, right? Like we're just trying to build better apps. We're not trying to build better on-chain apps. We're just trying to enable the best products possible to be built. So I think it was a bit logical. And I think it was also like a bit of, we need to start thinking about this now as opposed to the next 3 to 5 years. Like these products will probably be coming to fruition in the next 3 to 5 years and really hitting their stride. So if we don't think about it now, we're not going to have the network effects to then like backtrack and try to bring those founders on base later.
Sure. No, I love that. And I certainly agree that Deepen as a category has a high proclivity to intersect with these massive TAMs and do deliver products that bring a lot of customers on chain because, to your point, they are crypto native by default, but they don't necessarily even need to expose that to the user. They're just better versions of products that exist today. I'm curious, what was the very first introduction that you had to Deepen prior to things you were doing at Base? A lot of people get exposed to the category via Helium, but were there certain projects that it piqued your interest that sort of helped drive your decision to push this at Base?
Yeah, I guess like personally, like the first ones I heard about is, like, you're right, like I heard about Helium first. I think this is during this like 2020, 2021 time where I was really thinking about, okay, there's other cool ways to make money. I wasn't like really like a trader ever. So I was like, okay, cool, like I could potentially buy this infrastructure and make some money, like essentially like mining tokens, right?
Yep.
I think like some of the early ones were definitely like Demo, Helium as well. So we're also like very happy to have Demo be part of the Base community now and Base ecosystem. But that was really the first interactions I had with Deepen as a category. But yeah.
I love that. I feel like a lot of our listeners are going to have a pretty good understanding of what Base is. But before we jump into sort of Deepen on Base, can you give a high-level explanation of what Base is, maybe some of the competitive advantages that it has as a chain from a developer selection standpoint, and just give that holistic overview before we start diving into the Deepen specific projects?
Yeah, of course. So for those who don't know, Base is a layer 2 built on top of Ethereum using the Optimism stack. So we're also part of the superchain as well. And really what our goal is to build a global on-chain economy and bring the world on-chain. So how are we doing that and kind of getting into some of our strategic advantages? I think like at a high level, and this is, I'm sure, how every ecosystem is thinking about things, but we just need to make Base like fast and cheap first and foremost. So that's one thing our team is like really optimizing for. We've recently released Flash blocks at ETH Denver, which enables 200 millisecond effective block times through pre-confirmation blocks, which is going to be super powerful. That goes live on mainnet at the beginning of the summer. We also want to create like the easiest developer experience possible. I think this is something that we've done extremely well since day one, both with our internal tools. I think we have things like On-Chain Kit, which is an open source, ready to use repository of components that make it easy to build on chain. These are things like wallet, on-ramp, etc. We have our Paymaster and Smart Wallet product, again, which makes it easy to spin up a wallet, or you use passkeys, no 12-word seed phrases, can sponsor transactions through account abstraction as well. We also recently, which is like maybe a bit particular focus on Deepen, we've seen a lot of traction here recently since the launch at ETH Denver, but our app chain product, which is basically to create L3s on Base for those who need dedicated block space. We've seen Deepins be like pretty interested in that, who need that, want to put a lot on chain, want that dedicated block space. The advantage here is it's sub 10-second round trip between Base and the L3. So it's really easy to still be part of that Base ecosystem, take advantage of Base DeFi. Now, especially that we have things like verified pools, etc., that are going to make it, I think, that are going to be really important for things like energy Deepins who kind of have these like complex financial markets behind them, and they're going to want to bring institutions on chain. So those are like a few things. There's definitely more to keep going. On the distribution side as well, I think is where Base is going to continue to get extremely differentiated. One of these is last fall, Jesse took over the vision for Coinbase Wallet, which is going through an evolution right now. That's going to give builders on Base distribution to obviously millions of users who are using Coinbase Wallet. We also recently acquired Spindle, which is an on-chain ads platform, which is another form of distribution, which is going to be very powerful. And then there's like the advantages of just being part of the Coinbase family. I think a really cool example is that we actually saw Demo do is something like Coinbase One, where Coinbase One is this monthly subscription for basically to make trading fees free on Coinbase and a bunch of other things. So it's our most retained, highest value users, and we're rolling out on-chain benefits platform or benefits to these users, which they've been like super excited about. And Demo actually rolled out some on-chain benefits as part of that program. So getting distribution to hundreds of thousands of users through Coinbase One as well.
Sure, super fascinating. There's definitely a lot of advantages by being part of that ecosystem with all the other infrastructure and tooling that you're building. And then maybe over and above that, just for people that want to understand the dynamics of the L2 world, there's incredible speed, performance, cost benefits, right? And those are important for Deepen projects. You're going to have ideally lots and lots of users and lots of transactions. Can you just maybe help folks understand the differentiation between L2s and L1s?
Yeah, of course. So I actually think like effectively for DePIN builders, like who are just looking for block space, it won't entirely matter to them as much. But in terms of what an L2 is versus an L1, basically what we do is we take advantage of the security guarantees of the Ethereum ecosystem and use Ethereum for data availability using blobs. So basically, I think how it's been like described to me is there's like the Ethereum highway, and then next to it is a dedicated kind of road or even like train track for like public transit, where you're like piling all these transactions into train cars or a bus or something like that. And they have like their own dedicated road to go on. So you get a lot more scalability, you get more speed, etc. There are some other optimizations that Base is also doing specifically and that we're on the frontier of that make Base even faster and even cheaper than our competitors in the L2 space, Flashblocks being one of them. We're now like the fastest L2 as well, and will be the fastest L2 when that goes live on mainnet. So those are some of the advantages that we have as well to add to that.
That's great. I really like that analogy of the highway and then maybe the train on the side. That's a good way to explain the differences. So let's jump into the Deepen side, because I think that's one of the incredibly exciting aspects to Base right now. You've got big Deepen projects building on Base that have either migrated or they're building from the very get-go. You've got projects like Demo. You've got projects like Daylight in the energy space. I saw World Mobile, they migrated over to Base not too long ago. So what does the Deepen ecosystem look like today? Maybe talk through some of those projects that are building, maybe a few of those that you're really excited about. Because I think part of the interesting aspect is that there's been a lot of developer interest to build on Base, and you're spanning the different categories within Deepen, whether that's energy, whether that's wireless communications, so on and so forth.
Yeah, of course. So I think something that like Base has done particularly well is, and how I'm thinking about applying this to Deepen, is making sure we have a really diverse ecosystem. All these building blocks work together. Like I think a reason why a lot of Deepins potentially want to build on Base is because there is users there. DeFi is important. There's like deep liquidity. Stable coins are really important. USDC sends are free on Base. You get native yield on Base through USDC. And we also have a huge local stablecoin push, global on and off ramping, et cetera. So all these things are like very important and all combine. And I think that also applies to Deepen as well. I'm definitely going to forget there's a ton that continue to launch that are new on Base. I think just like general categories where we've seen a lot of traction is, I think like the overall pattern that we've seen is people who have a very strong focus on end product usability is really where we've seen the strongest traction, or like the biggest pattern with new Deepins, or like the Deepins that are migrating over to Base. I think Demo is a good example. They put a ton of time into their kind of like smart accounts and onboarding flow. Daylight on the energy side has put a ton of work into their consumer facing app. I guess it depends like how you define Deepin, but if we throw Nosh and Daylight into there as well, being like very thoughtful of those experience. Brain Trust, I think, was like the first to be considered a Deepin that was on Base. Another category generally is obviously like on the AI side as well. I think this is like loosely defined in Deepen, but like on the physical infrastructure side, I think we're starting to see a lot of compute networks definitely pop up on Base. On the distributed training side, there is Prime Intellect. Obviously, we're seeing on like the spatial AI and AR artificial reality side with Yuki, and there's a bunch more as well. Saffron, Hyperbolic is accepting payments exclusively on Base. So those are just a few that come to top of mind. But again, I think just going back, we are being thoughtful on making sure that like a lot of the conversations that I've had are enabling use cases that will combine like multiple Deepins. So for example, I was speaking with an AI team recently, and there's like a possible integration where, hey, like maybe down the line, someone can order a coffee using an AI agent through Blackbird and get rewarded on Blackbird. And their order can change depending on what the weather is, depending on like their kind of like local, what the local like weather Deepin is like spitting out, right? So like I can have an iced coffee if it's hot out, and a cappuccino if it's cold or something like that. So I think these are like the use cases that we'll see, and it's like very important to have a very wide range of applications building on top of the ecosystem in order for that to work together and for them all to excel.
Sure. That's really interesting. What Deepen projects are you seeing take advantage of sort of the L3 expansion? Are there any notable examples that you can talk to with respect to that angle on Base?
Yeah, of course. So this just launched at ETH Denver, so a little under a month ago. MVL was the latest. They're like an initial launch partner. They're the first DePIN to have dedicated app space that they're looking for launch on Base. We have been talking for them for a while. They're really like looking for a solution that fit their needs. And the app chain just made it super easy. Like all of our developer tools work out of the box for app chains. You have access to smart wallets, you have access to Paymaster, all this kind of stuff. So again, I think another thing we think about and I think about deeply when it comes to DePINs is, and again, what Base has done well and what's really important is making it as easy as possible to build on chain. These, as we said, like these products are chasing massive TAMs, but they're massive because the incumbents have been building for decades and are super entrenched. So I don't really want the founders spending a ton of time really thinking about all of the complexities of building on chain. Like we want to make it easy, take advantage of all the advantages that come with building on chain, ownership, etc., but then go out and tackle the really hard problem that people are trying to solve and go after the market that they're looking to break into.
Yeah, I appreciate that intentionality. Maybe you touched on this a little bit earlier, but could you unpack that decision process, why a project might decide to actually spin up their own L3, or what some of the advantages of having an app chain really tangibly look like for builders, and maybe over and above that, what that actually means for user experiences or just interfacing with these different projects, just to help compartmentalize that within the world for folks?
Yeah, of course. So a lot of what we see for like why someone would spin up an app chain is they may be putting, it's kind of like really up to some of the design of the protocol, right? Like we see some DePINs that just have a token as like an incentive layer, and then some DePINs that have like literally everything on chain. These are definitely oriented for those who have a lot of stuff going on chain and they want to post usually it's a lot of data, as much data as possible. Base is already very cheap. I think the median transaction is a little over 1/10 of 1 cent. But of course, if you're having millions and millions of transactions, that starts to pile up. So the reason that people do go for the app chain is, one, to get that cost down so they could put that stuff on chain, still have all the advantages of having their data on chain, that verifiability, that ownership for the user. In the end experience, the user really shouldn't feel a difference. They'd likely be getting rewarded via their tokens on Base, the L2. They have access to that liquidity, etc., all those on and off ramps. So that should be like fairly easy. If someone wanted to do payments, they would also do that on the L2, abstract that away. If they did want to have some stuff natively on the L3, it is really easy to bridge back and forth. So again, that less than 10-second round trip as well. So those are like the core advantages. There will be also, we're hoping to potentially bring flash blocks to the L3 as well, which will also enable that 200 millisecond block times, which will also be very powerful in that case. So those are the main advantages of building on the L3. It's really looking for additional block space, usually for super transaction or on-chain data, like heavy applications that need to reduce their cost.
Sure. I think that's a helpful way to kind of explain it for people to understand. And somewhat related to another topic we were just chatting about, which is this decentralized AI ethos or just conversation has really dominated a lot of the mindshare within Base. How are you seeing these adjacent applications either driving adoption moving forward, or maybe leveraging some of the scalability that you can have with L3s and kind of the intersection that AI has with Deepen to drive adoption? Because I feel like there's quite a bit to unpack there in terms of driving value for Base as a chain, and also developers and app builders that want to choose it.
Yeah, 100%. This is something that I'm the most excited about, and like why I'm so excited that the AI ecosystem has really been growing on Base as strongly as it has been, and that like we're being super thoughtful also on the infrastructure side with things like Agent Kit, etc., that really just make it super easy for AIs to interact on chain. So in terms of, okay, like what's going to grow in the AI ecosystem, I actually think these agents are going to be, I think this like actually might be fairly obvious, but are going to be massive consumers of DePIN data over time, right? Like you have access to up-to-date verified data. And data is like really a massive, obviously, differentiator when it comes to training these large language models. We see this with like Grok having access to all Twitter data, et cetera. There's also another huge strategic advantage I think that's overlooked when it comes to DePIN data is user privacy laws. So people, of course, like you own your own data. So there's no, you are in charge of permissioning, you own that data to start with, et cetera. So you don't have to deal with things like, okay, is a company has to store this data, a company has to like have all this infrastructure set up to host your data, and then you're not even getting any value for it, right? Like they're going and selling it to whoever like wants to basically mine it. And obviously, again, this data is going to be super important for AI. So I think things like Demo, Nebula, a bunch of like on the weather side, anything that's like any DePIN that's producing a ton of data is going to be really powerful. And I think we'll see AI agents really be like large consumers of that over time. Outside of that, I think, again, diversity in this kind of like sub-ecosystem is also very important. So on the distributed training side, I mentioned Prime Intellect. Obviously on the compute side, we see a ton of projects there. I mentioned Hyperbolic, Cephron. I think Prime Intellect also does some of this. Then there's the agent frameworks, right? Like just giving agents wallets. AgentKit does this extremely well. We actually just added our smart wallet API. So now you could create gasless agents as well. So you don't need to plug in your agent with ETH. It could just go do its thing. You could attach it to Paymaster. So you could make it, attach your credit card to it. It makes it like super easy for it to just go do its thing on chain. And then there's other, I think, AI projects that are overlooked that are also super important in kind of this overall process. Two projects that come to mind are, one is Pond. Pond is this AI model factory specifically for on-chain data. So people could say, hey, like I want a model train for a specific thing. We did this with wallet risk. It's also for token recommendations on Base. We hosted 2 contests there. They were super successful, saw tens of thousands of submissions. And another interesting thing is data labeling. We see this with a protocol called Sapien. Basically, obviously, like you have all this data, and then it needs to be labeled, classified, all these things in order to make it into training, et cetera. So Sapien is doing that with their incentive layer as well, so people can make an actual wage training these AIs. So yeah, those are, again, a few. There's a lot going on. So yeah.
That's super interesting. And we're already seeing different DePIN projects take advantage of all of these ecosystem players in the Base world with respect to this user privacy focused data.
Yeah, the user owns their data. So something actually related to privacy to bring up too is we also recently, a ton of acquisitions, but acquired a privacy focused team in Ironfish. So they're going to be laying out our privacy focused roadmap over the coming months. I think like something that we recognize is, okay, like there's an aspect to where you comply with privacy laws by owning that data, but you might not necessarily want to share all that data, or like you do want to share some verification of that data, like PII is like a good example.
Right.
So I think we understand that privacy primitives are going to be super important. So I think we're like one of the only teams that have that kind of focus and team in-house now to lay that out. That's going to enable, again, all these use cases, make it even easier to share your data on chain, and also make it easier for institutions to come in and participate on these DePIN networks as well.
Sure. That's really interesting, especially considering that one of the big competitive advantages of a lot of these DePIN networks are the data that they're collecting. And so it sounds like those different projects will have kind of this direct access to leverage these tools to help ensure that they are being compliant and also doing things in a manner that allows for the optimization around data acquisition, but also keeping some of those primitives around privacy like a core tenet to what they're doing. Is that safe to say?
Yes, of course. And then like at the same time, like we also want to make things, again, like we're going to continue to decentralize. Like we want to align with the ethos of Ethereum, the Ethereum community. So this is not like turning it into some closed source system. This is saying, hey, like how can we bring these really important privacy primitives off chain so we can all participate in this permissionless, open and decentralized ecosystem, rather than needing to set up like, I need to set up like a new blockchain that's permissioned and only like certain people can enter. So that's the vision we're trying to build for.
That's exciting. I think it's fairly obvious after having this conversation why a builder might choose to build on Base versus some other options. But if you were to just give your like 30-second elevator pitch for founders, what would that be for the succinct points for why they might choose Base?
Yeah, of course. I think the succinct points is one, it's the easiest place to build on chain. There's no question about that. We have developer tools, open source developer tools all ready to go in-house that you could spin up in seconds and minutes. Two is the base ecosystem as a whole, robust DeFi ecosystem, local stablecoins, international stablecoins, a privacy roadmap, of course, fast, cheap. And then lastly, I think which is really important, is distribution. Distribution to millions of users of Coinbase Wallet, distribution to the developers building on Base, scalable distribution through on-chain ads through Spindle, and then lastly, obviously, the association with the large, trusted institutional brand that Coinbase is, and the access to the hundreds of millions of verified users that platform has onboarded over the last 10 plus years.
That's well said. We're going to clip that right there and just post that as why you might want to choose to build on Base. So what else is ahead for the Base team? Sounds like there's a lot that's been in the works between development, between acquisitions, really building out the robustness of the ecosystem. But are there any other things on the roadmap that you're able to talk about that might be interesting or relevant for folks that are either in Deepen or building projects and they're considering Base?
Yeah, I think one, very excited about what the evolution of Coinbase Wallet looks like for distribution. I think that's going to be like a paradigm change in what on-chain apps look like. I hope we're a leader there. And I think more importantly, this is going to give DePIN apps the ability just to get in front of users super quickly. So that's one thing I'm super excited about that's coming up in the next few months. Another is seeing what our privacy roadmap looks like. I think that combined with verified pools, especially in the energy sector, and even like with weather, there's all these complex financial derivatives and hedging that goes on in the background as these ecosystems get more mature, and like to bring these sophisticated actors that are needed to form those markets and bring them on chain. These are going to be like really important tools. So that's something else I'm excited about. Very excited about flash blocks going on mainnet. It's always great just to get faster, cheaper. I think there hasn't really been in the EVM a leading DePIN network that has been as fast and cheap as Base is. So we're really excited to have that come to fruition as well. But yeah, those are the main things.
That's great. That's great. So where else can people stay up on everything that's happening in the Base world? Do you have any call to actions for folks to go check out and follow?
Yeah, of course. Definitely follow the Base page on X and Warpcast as well. I think if you're looking for more kind of like in-depth product updates, definitely check out our blog, go on base.org. You could get onboarded to all of our developer tools super quickly there. There's a bunch of templates, guides, etc. And then of course our blog. I think a sneaky place that's overlooked largely is our developer blog.base.dev. This is like going to be for more technical folks, going like really a bit more in depth on. We are on the leading edge on the engineering side, I would say, across the EVM, both across wallets, across building out the chain itself. So definitely take a look there if you want to follow along what we're doing, especially as we know we lay out things like flash blocks and our privacy roadmap, etc. I think that's an excellent place to follow along. And then if you're interested in building on Base, feel free to shoot me a DM. Really anyone on the Base team, their DMs are open. Jesse, myself, Sam Frankel, who's our head of ecosystem. Please reach out to anyone. They'll make sure you're connected, taken care of. We really take pride in that. I think we have a huge focus on being builder first. Ecosystem would be really nothing with the contributors and builders being really anyone who contributes to the Base ecosystem. We really try to be thoughtful on how we support our builders.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Being a builder over and above some of the podcast stuff, who also is building on Base, having access to people like you that are in the ecosystem that actually care about projects being successful I think is really awesome to see. It's really important, and it's nice to be welcomed for building something that could hopefully change the world within the Deepen ecosystem. So my final question before we wrap things up is, by the next time that we chat, what's the one thing that you hope the Base team accomplishes, or just that you hope to accomplish within Deepen on Base that users can potentially get excited about?
Yeah, of course. I think there's two. I think one is I want to be able to onboard my parents to their first DePIN that's built on Base. I think that's like first and foremost a product that like they like, that makes sense to them, that has like an easy flow. That would be something amazing. Again, they're like obviously not super on chain, so I think that's like a perfect, like the tools are here. Would love to get them onboarded onto a DePIN built on Base. And then the other thing is, I think, again, by the next time we speak, we want Base to be the default home for DePIN across all chains, across the entire on-chain ecosystem generally. I think we could do it. I think we have the tools, the distribution, etc., to help projects grow and to help them, the whole ecosystem, get there. So excited for it.
Okay. We'll definitely set those as kind of the high-level milestones, and I'm sure by the next time we chat, those will have been reached, and we're certainly rooting for you. Luca, I really appreciate you coming on, getting a chance to unpack everything that's happening, really sharing some of the benefits or just things that builders should be aware of as they're doing their chain analysis. And I think you guys bring so much to the table, and I appreciate the fact that you're really intentional around people building Deepen and just apps in general on base. And so I think that really shows through and just how passionate you are about all of this. So I want to say thank you again. We'll definitely have all of that information linked, the X account, Luca, all the other folks on the team that you might want to reach out to if you're building in the ecosystem, as well as just other information that might be relevant. So Luca, I want to say thank you again. I think we'll wrap it up here, folks. Definitely go follow them, and we will see you on the next one. Luca, take care.
Thank you, Tyler. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.